There's that creepy voice, but here we are. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Monday night. Oh, here we got someone in the room coming. Um, we're gonna get started kind of slowly as people start to filter in. But welcome and thank you for joining. I'm really excited to see some fresh faces here. So tonight. Let us get underway. I've scheduled us for an hour and a half. I will probably be more like an hour is my estimate. But if the questions are firing off, then happy to stay for a little bit longer. But as people are coming on in, please go ahead and share your students' grade level and why you're here, like any questions you might have or want to learn in this webinar in the chat. In a second, we'll do some introductions. But presenting today is myself, Kate. We have Claire Mitchell here, one of our wonderful educators and advisors. And we have Valentina Flogel, also another advisor here at Testiv. So super nice to meet you all. We hope you learn some interesting new things. Nice 10th grader. Okay, let's jump into our agenda as people continue to come in. So, like I said, to start, we'll do some introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about Testiv. Those of you who are here probably know more about Hampton, right? Hampton Tutors. We're going to talk about basically how we're forging a partnership with Hampton and Testiv in the next few slides. Then we're going to jump into the nitty-gritty of everything. So how extracurriculars fit into the application process. We're going to talk about, a general cheat sheet about quick summer programs, things that you should consider, things that you want to invest your time in that will be your best return on investment. We're going to do a quick student case study. We're going to hear from actually Claire here, who is a current Princeton student who also used Testiv for test prep. We'll be able to hear from her about what her experience was like and what she attributes her success around summer planning, but also in general around her applications. Then we'll take you through a fully mapped out summer timeline, essay strategy, not a deep dive, just we don't have time for it. We'll do another webinar on that, but we'll definitely talk through our process here at Testiv and how during the summer you should invest some time into jumping in on those essays, and we'll explain why a little bit later. But yes, welcome all, and thank you for being here. So to start with, a little announcement, and this is kind of why you are seeing Testiv even in this webinar. So I've been at Testiv for about a year now, but Testiv has been around for a very long time. I think we started in about 2014, serving thousands of students in test prep. Now, we have always had the experience of helping students with specifically their test prep, right? So like they come to us, they're juniors, they're like, oh, I have a lot of like test anxiety, and I gotta do well on this really high stakes test, and I've never learned how to take this test. Like it's a totally different format than you're used to. And what we always have said, I know that our CEO, Kate and I have talked about this at length, was like, oh, it'd be so nice if we could engage with students when they're younger, when they have time to build great habits and skills and confidence. So that they're prepared for high stakes testing. High stakes testing is not something that goes away the second the SAT is done either, right? So Testiv is really all about like what we've always wanted to do is really prepare people for college, not just for this test. Although our work is pretty targeted, we want to make sure that students leave with like a really, really strong skill set that's going to serve them in college. So when we met the folks at Hampton, we saw like an immediate alignment here. Something that Testiv has really had a lot of experience with, actually, just sort of organically, is getting students who have learning differences or different neurodivergencies, and looks like we got someone coming in, and they are people who need a lot of help with gaining confidence in the test prep space, right? So our educators are already pretty in on that space. Hampton, additionally, that's their bread and butter, right? They're coaching students who have learning differences and different needs and need accommodations. So with this acquisition and this partnership, what we're able to do is spend a longer amount of time with our students. I think one of my favorite things about being a testive educator is the amount that you get to bond and really have like a wonderful relationship with your student. And with Hampton, we have the opportunity to extend that, right? So we're really excited. And this is our, big first announcement that we joined forces. So a little bit more about just Testive, since you are familiar with Hampton. Like I said, we've helped over 7,000 students develop the skills needed for these high stress exams, these high stakes exams. At the same time, we also do have a college advising department, which I run myself, and work with wonderful people like Valentina and Claire to support students with the other aspects of college applications. So, in joining forces with Hampton, we are really excited to be able to work with parents and families earlier, help them learn about self-advocacy and like the best way to move through high school, gaining skills for high stakes testing, but also gaining life skills, right? And so seeing that all come together with Hampton and Testive is really exciting. And we're excited to tell you a little bit more about what we're all about. Now let's get to the fun stuff though. So first I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Kate. I've been working as a college advisor since 2012. I was an English major, always have loved writing. That's always been like my favorite, one like a hobby of mine, something that I truly love to do, and storytelling. So I began this work right after graduation. And it's one of those cases with a lot of educators, like it's something that I just continued to do, right? It's just something that felt very easy. I love mentoring kids through this really transitional time. I think it's a very hopeful and exciting time, but also can be stressful. So being able to be that person for students and families has always really, really appealed to me. And it's just been incredibly fun. So I also find that like the learning aspect of it is really cool, which I'm sure Valentina and Claire, you can agree that like you learn such interesting things from your students, and students these days are so smart and so thoughtful. So it gives me a lot of hope for our future. So I really have enjoyed this role. Um, Now, what I would love to do is hand it off to Valentina to introduce herself real quick. And I promise it won't be just me yapping this entire time. We're gonna open this up to all three of us talking, and make this a really fun conversation. So, Valentina, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name's Valentina. I'm a new college advisor, but I have a lot of experience applying to college and kind of navigating different programs as well as international programs. And I really also love writing. That's also a hobby of mine. I love reading fiction, and I think that what is great about college advising and getting to meet students who are in this stage of their life is getting them to get excited about things in their life that they love and finding ways to talk about that in an essay, so it doesn't have to feel this generic or like overly structured. Really like helping them like find their voice, because I feel like often you get so used to being in this like very structured kind of education system, and I feel like a lot of these essays are a chance to express yourself. And so yeah, I would love to work with any and all students. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Valentina. Do you have a good book you've read recently that you like?
Yeah, so recently I read this book called The Tainted Cup. It was really, really fun. It was like a Sherlock Holmes kind of type,
Oh,
but like
cool.
fantasy murder mystery kind of book. Really, really good.
Nice. I love a murder mystery. Love those. Wonderful. All right. And thank you, Valentina. Now we have Claire, who's an educator here, an advisor. She can also teach a ton of different subject-specific programs. So Claire, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Claire. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm really excited to start working with Testive. I've tutored in the past, but I am new with Testive. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to like connecting with students and like being able to cater like certain tutoring or just whatever they need to like their needs. I feel like everyone deserves to have the opportunity to like have learning that is made for them. And I don't know, I'm just really excited to be able to provide that. Personally, like I'm very interested. Oh, I'm a math major at Princeton, so I love math, but I also love the arts. Like specifically, I love music performance. So if you have any questions about that too, I mean, that's what I love.
So I will definitely be asking you some questions about that later. Wonderful. All right, so let's jump in. I wanted to kind of set the scene here and talk a little bit about what the scope is of this conversation tonight, right? Obviously we get students from all different like areas of needs, all different kind of walks of life, different academic goals, right? And I think one thing that I've always like really enjoyed about advising at Testive is I also get a lot of students who don't have a traditional educational pathway, who I'm helping coach, like say they have to leave high school for some specific reason. I'm coaching them on like what comes next. When do they apply for, let's say, a community college? What's the pathway to a four-year education if you want it? If you want something else, what's that other pathway, right? For tonight, this conversation is really centered a lot around selective admissions, though. It's its own very specific game, as our advisors know. Um, and while like pretty much all of the attention in media is taken up by selective schools, they occupy such a small piece of the pie when it comes to admissions. So one thing to be aware of is that when we're talking about selective schools, that's about like 50 to 100 schools. They're the brand name schools you see on US News, and they're probably the ones you've heard about, right? But there are a ton of amazing fit programs. The reason why I wanted to establish a little bit of scope here, though, is because we first, in order to figure out how to plan our summers, we've got to figure out what these colleges are looking for, right? What do colleges want to see in a student who ultimately applies to their university senior year? What do they want to see them have done? So we're going to start with the selective admissions model. One, because we have a lot of information about it, which I'll explain in a little bit. And number two, because if you build your profile to be really appealing to a really selective school, you're probably going to have a good amount of luck with other schools, right, within that space. If you have questions in general about what different pathways look like, that's also something we certainly do. So go ahead and book a call with us, reach out to us. You can email me, I'll give you my info at the end. So just one thing to keep in mind, and all this information that we give you will still be really relevant to planning your summer. We have more than just talking about college readiness. We built a really holistic, a holistic checklist. So make sure you stick around because we'll give that away at the very end. Okay, so like I said, we're going to use one specific school actually to talk about how admissions officers look at a student's profile. What are their different metrics that they weigh? And like I said one specific school, and that is for a reason. So just in terms of a college admissions nerding out moment, in 2018, a group of students sued Harvard University. It was a very big deal. It was a groundbreaking case, and it ended up basically that the students had enough of a case that Harvard was deposed in this trial. As you know, when you get deposed, or maybe hopefully you don't know, but as you know, when you get deposed, you have to share all of this information, right? And so all of a sudden, these colleges that have been able to hide how they evaluate student applications, the truth was out, right? The cat was out of the bag. All of a sudden, like hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation around how students' profiles are looked at and scored, all from Harvard. So they were not happy about that, certainly. But admissions counselors were really happy and students were really happy, right? Because students could also look and see, like in their file, what did Harvard like or what did they not like? What were their comments? So it's a really, really illuminating process. And like I said, Harvard's approach is not going to be exactly the same, but we've had confirmation from a lot of admissions officers that the process looks similar. They're looking at similar buckets, right? So all I want to focus on, because I could do a whole other 2-hour webinar on just like the nitty-gritty of all of that, but what I want to focus on tonight is what are the buckets, right? What are the things that these colleges look at outside of academics, which we obviously know they'll look at, right? What do they look at? How do they view them? And what should our approach be? So Harvard revealed that they actually have 4 different categories so that they look at students on. And they have a scoring system. It's pretty structured, right? So I would say that this probably looks similar at other institutions with, is there one category that surprises people about this? Because I remember seeing one and being like, what? I think we were talking about this a little bit,
The
Valentina.
yeah, the
Yeah.
athletics, right?
Yeah, I was like, well, wait a minute. What if I've never played a sport, but I'm brilliant? Like, are you saying that I'm not going to get in to Harvard? And that is a that's a valid response to that. The athletics category, I would say, just for like our intents and purposes, what they're referring to is this student going to be a recruited athlete? Because actually, your biggest kind of way into these Ivies is if you're a recruited athlete. If you're a one in athletics, that means they're going to recruit you. You'll be playing on their team. And your chances of being admitted if you are an athletic one is 88%. So that's pretty good odds, especially for a place like Harvard. Um, the rest of the categories are pretty like intuitive, right? I think sometimes people divide these categories into two things, right? There are hard factors and soft factors that have to do with the college application. The hard factors being academics, the numbers, the test scores, anything that's just like the hard data, like school profile. And then there is the soft factor aspect of it, right? Which is how does the student write? What are the recommendations like? What are things that actually make them like a real person, right? Rather than just a set of numbers and data. So, keeping in mind that when you are kind of building your profile as a student through your 4 years of high school, you're going to want to be looking and thinking about really kind of these three components like academics, extracurriculars, and personal, right? Personal might have surprised some people too. But personal was something that, especially in these depositions, the questions around a student's personal score had often to do with what type of roommate would this student be? Like, I think he'd be an amazing roommate, or doesn't contribute enough to like their community, right? So it's kind of an extracurricular question, but it's also kind of a personal question, right? Like, what kind of person is this student? How will they be on campus? Will they be heading the books all the time, or will they be really actively contributing to their community and having a positive experience and be a great fit? Um, so with that in mind, I want to get a little bit more specific though, because not everyone's applying to Harvard. I don't think I mean, I've had very few students apply to Harvard in the past couple of years just because it's so specific and competitive. Um, but I will let you in on a little cheat code here, which is that the answer to the question of what does my school that I'm applying to care about is available to everybody. I think people just don't know about it. So I'm often when I'm advising students, talking to them about the common data set. The common data set is public information. It is required that students report their entire common data set, which again is a really, really lengthy, really granular document to the government. And essentially the government compiles all this data. And part of what you get is some information that you don't really care about. But I mean, I think Valentina and Claire, if you're able to take a student through this, then it really distills kind of your approach, right? So in general, we have like a couple categories: very important, not considered. Here we see that UW Seattle, which I picked because I know we got a lot of Washingtoners here. They look at extracurricular activities as important, right? Not the most important, but still definitely heavily weighed. Um, the way that I would think about this then is say you're looking at a school that's target on your list and we're not seeing test scores being considered, right? That's a pretty big deal because then you're losing a really hard data point, right? What do you have left? Grades, right? You have grades. Um, and I don't know if people are aware of this, but the amount of grade inflation that has occurred in the past few years, especially with COVID, I see Valentina nodding, um, has made it even harder for colleges to go just by grades. So the more information you can give admissions that is positive, the better off you're going to be, right? And sometimes you don't have the opportunity when it comes to testing. So this is all stuff that you should absolutely be looking at, and our advisors take students through. But in general, colleges, I would say, that are on the more selective side look at extracurriculars as important. Um, I mean, so advisors, if you want to weigh in, basically how we advise students on approaching their overall profile. Like when it comes to academics, how do we how do we respond to someone who is saying, I have a 4.0 and I had perfect grades. Like, and I have fives on APs, but I have nothing on my resume. How do you talk to them about their odds?
Yeah, I think one thing, like when you're applying to like these like very prestigious or like more selective universities, is a lot of people are on like a more level playing field when it comes to academics. So like these extracurricular activities and like how like you show like your interests is really like what makes them want to choose you. A lot of people like talk about how it's like how you fit into the school and like that's how they choose it when like everyone has such good grades. And I think that like holds true to a certain degree that like when you like show that you're committed to something and like you show that like you love something and like will like spend time and like you have passion, like universities really love that.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think uh the grades are kind of overinflated actually. Like they are a prerequisite. So to be in the running for admission, you need to have amazing grades, right? You need to have grades that are in the top probably 25% or 10% of the application pool. Um, but that doesn't get you in, right? Like that's not an acceptance. It just moves you to the next round. So all of the stuff that's super important that gets you accepted is the soft stuff. Valentina, like, can you think of an example of a student that basically you were able to help build like a really, really great essay or profile that you feel like helped?
Well, just thinking about some of the students that we talked about because yeah, like you both said, there's so many, the grades are sort of the weed out point of like
Yeah.
sort of the way that college degrees have sort of become this the same kind of like, oh, entry level, and then the way you get the job is through these more kind of soft details like you were saying. So I think, yeah, like a having an interest that you can speak really passionately about, even if it's something that doesn't sound that like interesting or
Yeah,
academic, it's even better sometimes, I think,
I
to show
agree.
that you have this sort of external passion. And like it doesn't even have to be something altruistic. I feel like people assume it has to be this like volunteer work, a community. Like obviously this is something that they do consider, and like I think it can help, but it should be this something that you can speak about in a way that's clearly that shows that you have interest in something beyond just like showing on paper that you can get
Yeah.
good grades.
Yeah, or that you like, even sometimes just showing you spent a lot of time doing something.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have students that I work with who can't talk about it really, or like don't want to, or, and so there's such a big difference between someone who, Claire is a really good example, I think, of someone who,
Hmm.
uh, in her story later, you'll hear kind of about how she put so much effort and passion behind her interest in a way that it stood out, right? Like, and I think that some of the most memorable essays that I've worked with students on have to do with the most, don't even have to do with activities. They might have to do with a chore like making the bed. Like it can be really mundane things, but if it's a story told really well, then that's incredibly impressive. And it gives a sense of your personality, which is really, really important. So, moving forward, right, like you definitely, there is a student, there's like a very common trope of a student, I would say, which is incredible academics, incredible hard data across the board. But then I think admissions officers might say in files, like, I just don't have a sense of who this person is, right? I don't quite get who this person is. And I'm talking a lot about sort of personal aspects, but how do you show who you are as a person more than like how you spend your time? So extracurriculars are so, so important. They tell such a story, and you'll have to write about them too. So it's something we want people to pay attention to. Summer after junior year is definitely kind of like the peak time of where your extracurriculars should be really kicking off. You should have some kind of long-term commitment or something that you're putting a sustained effort behind that you like is a really, really key part of that because people can tell you don't. So I'm just giving you an example of, like I'd said, there's a 4-point scoring system at Harvard. So we have essentially different categories of what a one looks like, what a four looks like, right? And so a one that really ups a student's odds of admission at Harvard means that, okay, they've got like national level, probably global contributions with their achievements, right? They might have like international or global awards, even like Olympiads, things like that. Um, I think they phrase as like future Nobel Prize winners. Now, a one at Harvard doesn't look like a one at other schools, right? So the way that I would just think about it is like, okay, what's going to put me at like the top 10% of the applicant pool at the school that I'm applying to, right? Um, so there are a lot of different ways that a student can be impressive that don't have to do with Olympiads as well. So it's all relative, but that's just for reference how Harvard looks at it. Okay, I've done enough setting the scene. I know that was a long time ambling through a lot of admissions stuff, but it's definitely important to just understand the context. So I want to talk a little bit about maximizing your summer. First of all, we're going to give you a cheat sheet here, which is general tips. There is so much misinformation about what a good extracurricular is, especially when it comes to summer programs, because a lot of these summer programs are businesses that are trying to make money and they're taking advantage of like a school's prestigious name, for instance, to, basically try to make a little bit more revenue. It doesn't necessarily help with admissions odds, right? So how do we find opportunities that are going to stand out the most on your application? That's what we're going to talk about now. So, general cheat sheet, and Valentina, I want you to pipe in here because I know you are heavily involved in some research yourself, working a PhD program. So, the very first thing I wanted to raise is research. If you're a junior or a sophomore and you're looking to apply to a fairly selected program, you've probably heard people talking about research, or your high school might have a capstone research program. There are programs that are what we call pay-to-play programs, which are, I don't know, I think Lumiere is a classic example where you pay a good amount of money to work with a current PhD student, and they guarantee you research publication. Obviously, it sounds really cool to be like, oh, I published a research paper and I authored it and it was on XYZ scientific topic, right? Um, there are a lot of pitfalls of this approach. One major one being where you're published. So when you're looking for research opportunities, the very first thing I want you to think about and look at in your opportunities is, okay, where do I have opportunity to publish, right? Valentina, I think you had talked about like how, or you'd heard about these kind of pay-to-play programs and what the student experience is like. Can you speak to that and what your
Yeah,
students and colleagues have told you?
yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of friends who've gotten hired for some of these, companies that help students publish, but I think, yeah, it ends up being you get published onto, you know, this site that college admissions are going to know that this, process exists for for paying to publish. So I think not only is it not really the sort of learning experience that you should be getting from this, because part of it you know it's nice to publish and important, but like you need to learn the work that goes into writing a research paper and what types of research is publishable. And
Yeah.
so yeah, with these, maybe it might look good on a resume, but like I said, at this point, college admissions are sort of aware that these services exist. So I always personally recommend, I mean, obviously, yeah, look into, reputable journals that, are in line with things that you are interested in, but also talk to if you're in high school doing any type of research work, or you're with your AP professors or part of any type of group, like talk to people who have published before, sometimes that is a better way because you can, if you've been working on a research project, a lot of the time that research is and ends up being published, but they sort of, will hire research assistants from high school to, help their project. And then you don't get that publication, even though you kind of worked on it.
Mhm.
So I think the best thing to do as a student always is to talk to people who are, your professors, if you're in dual enrollment, college professors even
Yeah, for
more.
sure.
And then yeah, like just look into what types of journals there's a lot of undergraduate journals, there's a lot of you know like pre-college journals, so just
Yeah.
look into that kind of thing. And then what kinds of research do you like doing? That's also something that is important. And I will say that submitting to like a journal and not getting accepted, but getting an art, like getting a revise and resubmit or something, that's also something you can put on a
Yeah.
resume for a college application. And I think that would look, better than some of these, pay to publish sites.
Yeah, it's not without value, absolutely, to like go through the process, especially when it's pretty self-driven, rather than something where you're hiring an educator to really a lot of these programs, like the expectation that the educator does a lot of the work for you. Like students might sign on and just be like, okay, what do I do? And then it's like, well, no, you have to come up with what you're interested in. Like it has to come more from you, right? Claire, do you feel like, I mean, I'm sure on campus at Princeton, you've got a lot of people with some pretty amazing extracurricular backgrounds. Is research a common one? Like have you met some people who've done some really interesting work and what's stuck out to you?
I mean, yeah, research is definitely a common extracurricular. It's something that I personally like didn't come across in my high
Mhm.
school. Like people didn't really talk about it. I didn't even really know it was an opportunity. But after coming here, like a lot of my peers like have done research. Like my roommate, she did dual enrollment and did research with one of her professors at the school she dual enrolled with. And I think that could like be a potentially be a good opportunity, especially if you're like interested in lab work, like going through university is definitely a great like opportunity. I know there's one person who's like kind of like a campus celebrity for her research because like she's done a lot of work with NASA over like multiple summers. But obviously like most people haven't done like that kind of like crazy like prestigious opportunity. But like a lot of people definitely have done research and I think it's about like reaching out to people like, even if you think that you may have no chance, like, a lot of people are willing to help or at least talk to you about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's definitely an element of cold outreach that can happen when you're starting a research project in high school. But yeah, there are different categories, right? Like so there are high school research programs that are really great for your experience and your learning process, right? Because it's pretty scaffolded, like they'll guide you from, the very beginning of the process to the end. And it's great value added, right? Then it kind of runs the gamut, but all the way up to there are definitely some organizations that do coach students that are high schoolers with coaches that also published in high school, right? That know the process, that took the student through it, and then end up in these peer-reviewed, like nationally recognized journals, which that's amazing. Like if you can do that, and you have that opportunity, then go for it. But what we want to say is like that stuff costs just as much as some of these pay-to-play programs that like you're getting published in an internal company journal. There's no peer review, right? It doesn't have the trappings of like what really impressive research has. So that's where you want to, if you're like looking into research opportunities, think about where this publication ends up, right? And if it says like, oh, it's an internal journal, be wary of that because it can be really expensive and then also just not a good return on investment. Whereas like an opportunity like the former that I was describing is probably worth a pretty worthy return on investment because you are creating a project and you're working with someone who's really brilliant and has done this, and you're going to get published, right? So there's a lot of myth busting you have to kind of do around these research programs. But definitely chat with us if you have an opportunity and you're not quite sure of what to do. The next big thing, and it's kind of similar, is avoid listicles. Don't do the thing where you search top 20 summer business programs for students because likely it's going to be a marketing play. It's like affiliate marketing. And it has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with you, really. Like those metrics don't have anything to do with what you want to do with your summer. So in general, like we come from a place of start with yourself and find the best fit and don't go the other way around because that's when you get into trouble, right? A great example of this is pre-college programs. So let's say like Princeton's got pre-college programs, right? Like I'm sure up the wazoo, Claire. Now those are really great because one, you get to like see what it's like to be on a college campus and take classes and to really live the experience. You're taking college level courses, so it's not totally without value, right? But you do get a lot of students, like I have students come to me all the time, like, oh, I want to get into this school. Should I go to their pre-college program? And I'm like, you can, but like not if you think not if you're doing it because you think it's going to help you admissions wise, because it really does not. Some schools do look at demonstrated interest, and so you doing that might help, but it often does not. And so you want to be very clear on, okay, like what's the acceptance rate of this program, right? How selective is it? Because the more selective it is, likely the like that's what admissions offices look for, right? They want to see programs where many students didn't get in, you got in, you ran with the opportunity, and you got XYZ outcomes out of it, right? So that's not connected. It can be connected to prestige, and often is, but not necessarily for like a Harvard, Princeton pre-college program. Those are really not very selective at all. And you'll just have a fun experience, but it's a lot of money to spend on getting kind of like this holistic experience. So it's something I would definitely think about. Also, opportunities with lower acceptance rates tend to cost less. That's a little bit self-selecting. So then when you look at these programs where it's, it's $10,000 for, however many months, or however many days or weeks, that is also a red flag. So you want to look out for that. Just think about like, what's the value of what I'm getting, right? For my money, for my time. Next, I want to talk a little bit about just like our approach to planning extracurriculars, which is think of these three different categories, right? So we have academic enrichment. What's a subject you want to learn more about for fun? Can't stress this enough that you think would be cool to learn. And what is a community contribution you can make? What's something you can do for the people around you? This can be your family. This can be your friends. This doesn't have to be starting a charity. It can be, this is a very solid specific thing that I did. And then there's personal development. Do you have any personal goals that you would like to reach over the summer? You have to have that time to decompress. And again, colleges are looking to admit actual people, and not machines who can score perfect on every single test that they take, although it helps. So really the last tip is just whatever you sign up for, make sure you're incredibly excited about it. Like true passion reads in college applications, and doing something perfunctorily reads in college applications. It's very transparent from an admissions perspective. I'm not an admissions officer, but I've done it long enough that it's pretty easy to read through myself. So yeah, these are general just kind of like tips and pointers around selecting summer programs, right? Like what you should be looking for. Anything in terms of like anything you guys want to add, advisors, or any summer program you saw a student do that you were like, whoa, that's incredibly cool and memorable. I can start with one that helps, but I have a student who he thought he did nothing with his time because he was on the computer a lot. So I think people can be like, yeah, you're on the computer all day, you're not doing anything. He's put like hundreds of thousands of hours over time into different coding projects for different game platforms. And he just does it for fun. He does it for free. And he's now spending the summer, like I'm coaching him on starting his own game. He's not checking off three different things. He's not like, oh, should I start taking violin again? He's like, no, I'm going to invest my time in this thing that I actually think is really cool. When he talks about it, I can tell he's super into it. in a way that when we talk about other stuff, he's like not as not as excited. So that's always a good kind of thing to think about too, is like what's something that you can talk about exhaustively, um, and maybe invest some more time into that, even if it doesn't feel like a formal thing to you. Any questions in the chat or anyone? Okay, let's keep going. Okay, let me see if this. There it comes. It's always late. All right. I actually had to stop sharing my screen for now because I want to take a moment and just have a conversation and talk about Claire here, who was a Testive student with us. She is currently at Princeton. She's had a really successful application run. I think like the best people to hear from about what makes a successful application and the college admissions process in general is a student, right? Someone who went through it. So Claire, welcome to the stage. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Just tell me kind of about your background in high school, and what your considerations were when you were thinking about Princeton and all that.
Yeah, of course. So I went to a public school, so like a lot of the pressure to like figure out what I was gonna do like over the summer, how I was gonna prepare for like my applications, everything, like that was on me or like my counselors, like it wasn't as much guidance. So like the first thing I knew I wanted to do is I didn't want to overload myself with stress, like to start working out my college applications like the whole process because I
Mhm.
knew that classes like would still be rigorous like during the school year. So my first like to do my SAT prep, I decided I would actually use Testive after my sophomore year, so like that summer. I used Testive the whole summer, and I simultaneously did a internship program through my county or my city, and it was really nice. I got to like learn about different opportunities, like career opportunities in STEM and the arts, and like that really caters to like what I like to study, like as a math major who like also like wants to learn about the humanities and like how like that crosses over.
Mhm.
And Testive was like it was an online internship because it was like just after COVID, like so Testive was like easy to integrate into that schedule since it's like very flexible hours. And yeah, it was easy to work around like the time like I needed to
Yeah.
spend like on my computer or on Zoom. So yeah, so that's how I started like preparing for college. It was really like that time when I was thinking like, oh, like it's getting serious, like I need to start like getting my ducks in a row because I know like it's gonna ramp up like with when
Yeah,
applications start.
for
And
sure.
yeah.
Continue. Sorry. Good.
And you were talking about how like the junior summer is like known to be like the most important for like extracurriculars. Like so my summer after junior year, I participated in Gov School for North Carolina, which is like a program where like you go stay at a college with like a bunch of other like I guess it's not applicants anymore, other
Yeah.
students who are like interested in like a specific topic. I personally went for instrumental music, but one thing about Gov School is that like everything was about like building something new and like using interdisciplinary studies to like learn new things. So like everyone was there for like different like majors or like focuses. So like I would like collaborate with like people in the math department or like the English department and like see how like we can like combine our like focuses in like a
Yeah.
unique way. I think that's something that like ended up being really important to my application because it showed, I mean, like I've been doing music for a long time, like as long as I can remember. So like it showed that like I can combine that with like my academic interests
Hmm.
and like that ended up being like a big point in my application that like I care about like combining these things, like doing interdisciplinary studies and like yeah, so I think making like and even on top of this, like I had a lot of free time in both of these summers. Like it sounds like a large time commitment, but like these programs were like not super long. Even when I did Testive the whole summer, it was like only like a couple hours a week. It wasn't like so much time. So I still got to enjoy my summer and like I do think it's important that like they want you to know that like you like still are like enjoying your life. Like you're not committing everything to academics. because like they want you to be a happy person on campus. Like they want you to be like a part of your community. And like I think community is like something that's very important for colleges, which is like my internship, what I was talking about, like my sophomore summer, like that was like we had a capstone project that like went towards like bettering our community. Like including that, like definitely was something that like I think colleges are interested in.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it sounds, I think what sticks out to me is that all of the opportunities that you've talked about, they knock out a couple of those three, like several of the three categories we were talking about, right? Like, so you can have one opportunity address every single bucket of the big three that we're talking about, right? So community contribution, you clearly had, right? But you also were a really important member of your gov school by like collaborating with people from opposing fields. You certainly had academic enrichment with those opportunities. And then there's personal development as well that comes along with an opportunity like that. Pushing yourself into community advocacy in the first place is an incredibly like impressive personal journey to take and something that you have to learn your way through and push your way through. So that's great. And yeah, we're super, I mean, one thing about Testive and a general mantra of Testive is that we are not going to make you sit for, a 30-hour class. It's not going to be boot camp style. Our ethos in general when it comes to test prep advising is it's exactly what you need and nothing more, right? We believe in the capability of our students. We know that, they're going to pick things that sing to them. But how do we help them frame it? How do we supplement? How do we make sure that we're targeting things that they need to work on? And then the stuff that they're doing really well, you're off and running, go do it, right? So we're not demanding so much of your time. And in that way, we actually empower students to a lot more success because we're not making you sit down and labor over drills for hours and hours and hours. We are looking at specifically what needs to be fixed and addressed, kind of triage style, and then we're targeting that until the student starts to feel like it's working and clicking and it's better, right? Um, Wonderful. So, when do you feel like you hit a groove when it came to test prep? You're coming in as a sophomore, so you're already starting pretty early. What were some things that helped you through testive, and when do you feel like you really hit your stride?
Yeah, so when I started Testive, after like a pretty short amount of time, like I took my first SAT just to like see how I would like perform, and like it definitely left like some for improvement to me. So like after that, like we really like decided like found out what the problem was. Like I was having problems with the well, it was before the digital SAT. It was
Mhm.
like the reading comprehension sections with like the long passages, like remembering everything to like take out of that. So I think one thing, like once we started like looking through practice tests and then like going back and analyzing my exact mistake, like I was able to analyze patterns in the questions. I think that's when like I started to hit my stride, like when I realized all the questions like have something in common with like ones I've seen before, so I can analyze it the same way.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's something that we definitely emphasize. This test is not necessarily about, I mean, obviously you have to know some math, you got to know math content, you have to have some good literacy. However, there's so much pattern recognition that has to take place for you to be successful at that test. So our tutors teach to the test, right? We're teaching about specific tricks that the test employs. We're training students to think their way around it. And it sort of becomes a game in that way, which I really liked about even training through Testive is like, how am I going to best these these tests that are trying to trick me? So it makes it a little bit more of a fun process too. Um, Okay, Claire, last question. So, to what do you attribute your success of getting into Princeton? Obviously, highly selective school. What do you think did it?
I mean, yeah. So personally, like I was accepted like off the wait list of
Yeah.
Princeton. So I think that a lot of the things, like some of the smaller things that are like not like so largely considered, like also pushed me like towards the finish line. Like probably the biggest thing in my application that like put me like on the board at all was my music. Like I've been in orchestra since sixth grade. Like I've been doing music since
Yeah.
before that. And like even in my senior year, like I was like still committed. Like I was doing better than I ever had before. Like I did improve each year. And like when I sent them my like letter of continued interest, they like probably took that into consideration. I also like even though I was waitlisted and like in my mind, like I felt like it was like over, like I shouldn't even consider it anymore. Like I still tried to like keep my grades high, like just for like my own motivation. And like my grades ended up being like the best they had like ever been, like my senior year. And I think like although like that doesn't have to be the same for everyone, like when I sent that in, I think it was a sign that like I still cared about school. Like it wasn't all about college. And like I think they definitely liked that too. Yeah, I think a lot of it was just like my commitment to like academics past
Absolutely.
like just like the game of like getting into college. Because I think like a lot of people that like come to places like Princeton, like a lot of them just try and do every little thing to like try and get into the Ivy League and like they try and weed those people out. So
Yeah.
I think it's like good to just try and like be yourself, like try your best. I think that's what they really care about.
100%. And you came from such a genuine place. And your testing was the icing on the cake, right? This is someone who puts her time in things she really cares about, but when she puts her mind to it, she can provide that amazing hard data point. So we're happy that Tested was able to help you in the process. I think takeaways from just talking with you, Claire, that feel really important to share with everybody is once again, doing things from true passion is going to read. It just will. There are definitely signs that you can find. One is that grade dip, right? That you were talking about that a lot of other students have after senior year. You fought through that. And you found a personal victory out of something where you could have just given up, right? So that's already like a really strong sign of character the colleges love to hear about and want on campus. Number two, success does not end with college admissions. It doesn't end with test prep, right? Sometimes the story is not going to be, I got an early decision to my number one school, and then everything was perfect, and then I got a perfect job, and everything was perfect. Like the life is not like that, right? So what's incredibly important is how are you setting yourself up to succeed on whatever campus you are on, right? Um, there are students who would be successful on many, many campuses. But I also know some brilliant students that if they had to go live in the Northeast for 4 years, they probably wouldn't be very happy. So it's definitely something that we talk about it being so high stakes. Um, but we have to be playing a long game here. And people who are playing the long game are the ones who are investing their time in things they really love and care about, working on themselves personally. And yes, when they need help, getting those hard data points up, like test scores and grades, they're coming for help and they're getting that target that they need. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for talking to us. And yeah, it's really fun to hear kind of your story and how you made your way into success, getting into Princeton, and you're probably doing better for it now, I can imagine.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, so okay, let me go back here. I'm going to share my screen back. Now we are going to talk a little bit, pardon me, through this annoying transition that's about to happen. I'm going to take you through our summer schedule. This is, first of all, a look into this is what we're giving away to you all at the very end of the program. Yes, I know you can see my application. I'm sure it's going to take a sec. Present. All right. So one really big preamble to this, as you can tell, I'm a fan of preambles, is that this is a pretty aggressive timeline. Now there are people like Claire who like they're ready sophomore year for test prep, and that's awesome, right? There are some people who are gonna still be working on test prep through the fall, and it's not exactly that's not what you want to be doing, right? Like your schedule is going to be incredibly full when it comes to fall senior year. And so adding the additional responsibility of test prep, and then you have your college applications to do, and you have to write all these essays and gather all these materials. It's so much on top of like what's already a really rigorous schedule. So we're going real conservative here. And you just want to make sure that if you're not hitting some of these things right by June, that's okay. But this is just a general blueprint and recommendation. So, number one, look, it's just going to be 2 to 4 hours a week, pretty light lift. By June, you'll want to have decided on your college list or come pretty close to narrowing that down. You would do this through hopefully visits or virtual visits, information sessions that your school offers. By this time, you want to have most of the information that you need, right, about these colleges. You want to have been kind of done with your research, and picked also what your target major is, right, or at least potential target majors at these programs. Emphasizing fit is incredibly important. What are majors that are really precise, that fit my exact interests? Claire, I know that was your strategy in applying to Princeton, is like they're known for their interdisciplinary programming, which sounds like a buzzword, but there are actual like curriculum-based things that do show that about Princeton. So yeah, this is like you're kind of mapping out the scope of the project here, right? The college list is where you figure out everything that's required. It's where you start to figure out your deadlines, and then you're mapping out your strategy, right? We think about this as project management. You start with the end destination and kind of work your way back, and that's what an advisor helps you do here at Tested. So narrowing down your school list, start gathering those documents. Definitely ask your teachers for recommendations by the end of the year. That is a pretty hard deadline, in my opinion. You want to give them a good amount of time, and you want to give them a lot of information. So students have probably heard about brag sheets. Parents, you've probably heard about brag sheets. Sometimes guidance departments supply them. If your guidance department doesn't, make your own, right? This is a person, guidance counselors have known you, throughout high school. But I remember how much I interacted with my guidance counselor, and it wasn't a lot. So you want to make sure this person really knows you. And before then, if you're younger, spend more time with your guidance counselor, pop in, advocate for yourself, let them know like what your plans are and what you want to do, right? So making sure we have recommendations. Hopefully by June, you're planning on your testing schedule, right? You want to look at your scores. If you've taken an SAT score, you probably would have taken the in-school exam by this point. Register for a fall date. Book your test dates pretty far in advance. You can always cancel and get refunded, but with test seats being a little bit more limited these days, just map it out, right? And just make sure you got a seat. And definitely cancel them if you don't go, because that's a valuable seat. You're going to want to also begin that targeted test prep, right? So let's move on into July. July, we have drafting our personal statement, which, if anyone doesn't know, is the big main college essay that goes to every single application. So it's on the Common App. Some people call it the Common App essay. Some people call it the college essay. I call it the personal statement. 650 words, focusing on genuine storytelling. Like I said, one of my students wrote his essay about fighting his mom about making the bed. It sounds like a silly story, but it actually was so charming and so good. So it can be really about anything, but it has to be about you. It should not be about your entire life story. And it should be about a facet of you that's not going to show up on any other part of your application. This is you being in the room with the admissions officer, right? That's the way that you want to approach your personal statement. Share it with a teacher, share it with an advisor, share it with a counselor. It's definitely, it needs to be a personal story, and therefore personal stories sometimes they might hit weird. Like you just want a good objective eye who knows what admissions officers look for. Supplemental essays, I would say think about your supplemental essays and think about topics, right? So Valentina is going to talk about this in a little bit, just like the essay development process, but prompts for supplemental essays come out in August, so you can't really get them done, and it's so early anyway. But what you can do is say, okay, I'm going to have to write about my favorite activity. What is that? What am I going to say? Or I know I'm going to have to write about a community that I'm a part of. Like every single college has a question about that now. What is my topic that I want to focus on? So at least you should have a plan and spend a few hours per week getting content down, just getting like all of your life onto paper. that's the biggest recommendation I have for July. Work on that test prep, continue to intensify your studying. Typically, our programs are about an hour a week. Now you want to do some sustained drilling in the meantime. That's how it starts to become automated. But that is definitely something you want to continue focusing on. And with just an hour a week, then you've got a lot of time to focus on other things as well. We then, like I said, you're putting things on a page, do a full inventory brain dump. We have a resume builder here at Testiv and an activities inventory that we can use that's really helpful for students, emphasizing the fact that you might not even consider some of your activities, and we will. So we push students really hard to get all that down. Then think about scholarships. You want to talk to your school about this as well, but colleges that offer scholarships tend to have deadlines that are a little bit earlier. Look, they'll have a scholarship deadline, right? So USC is an example of a school that has a November 1st deadline if you want to be considered for merit scholarships. So make sure you don't miss those little tricky deadlines because they're not the best at sharing that. All right, August. Now, by this schedule, you basically have everything done, which is the ideal scenario, right? Because then you can start school, you're like applying. You'll still probably need to have some stuff pushed into the fall, but imagine being at this place, right? Where you're like, I'm almost done with my main essay. I know what I'm writing for my supplemental essays. My rec letters I've requested, and they're going to come in. I'm done with my testing, or maybe I have just one more to get like my super score up. And then, yeah, I'm sending out my transcripts. That's a very different place to be than, oh no, I have to start, which is what I get a lot of students doing in August, right? Okay. And then, yeah, September, like I said, we're hoping to be close to submitted here. And then that way, mid-year grades like are still reported to these colleges. So imagine having to be perfect on all of your classes and make perfect application materials and get your best score on your SAT or ACT. That's not setting yourself up for success. So this roadmap hopefully gives you a good, efficient way to get the whole process over with. It's an overall project plan. Things to note though, adjust this as needed, right? Communicate early and often with the people in your life where you're looking at your application, helping you with your application. Advisors also get pretty slammed. I know from experience when it comes to like the fall. So getting in with them early is going to make you a lot more successful. Okay, this is a little pointer on just how to use this checklist. You can check it off as you go, which is always a fun thing. But last little bit, I want to actually, Valentina, give you the floor to talk about your process specifically. Now, look, what I have here is our process for essay generation at Testiv. Every advisor kind of has their own way of doing things, right? It's often more lined up with personality. This is kind of the way that I've set out our process. But Valentina, I would love to hear your thoughts on how you first get started with a student when it comes to essay generation. Yeah, and then we're gonna leave you all to enjoy your evening.
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a really great overview of it. I think it really depends on the student how the process goes overall, but the beginning, the step one brain dump, I think that's a great way to describe it. The easiest way to for me to help you as a student is with information about you. So if sort of everything that you can talk about your academics, you can talk about your extracurriculars, you can sort of depending on if you're more right, like some people like to just free write, some people like to do mind maps, some people are more visual, or I'm happy to talk and take notes with you, if that's a way that you feel better. But it's so much easier to get started once I have a more holistic, I guess, view of who you are as a person, not just I want to get into X school. And like Kate was saying, you have different essay prompts, you have different things that different schools ask for. And so it's great to have sort of one massive sort of like show Bible or, the equivalent of that of your life. So it's things we can pull from depending on what, what you want, what you think is most important, what seems to align better with this school or not. Um, and so so the first step, brain dump, is exactly the same. And then also, you know, some students benefit from outlining. I
Yeah.
I like outlining too, but it really depends on sort of what the student needs, what programs they're most excited about getting into as well,
Yeah.
because you can focus more specifics on programs that they're very excited about. And then also another thing I like to do with students is to look at the courses that, if they already know what major they want, or if they have like specific clubs or something that's at the school, like a center. I know when I was applying for grad school, but for UCLA, one of the things I mentioned a lot was, the Center for the Study of International Migration that, you know, I was really interested in, and I had attended a lot of their webinars before as a undergrad. So, that sort of this little detail of like, this isn't just somebody that wants to go to UCLA because of, the name. It's, there's these certain things that interest them that have to do with who they are as people. And so that kind of, after knowing all these things about you, we can be more specific depending on, when these applications are due and all of that, and create a way for each application to sound unique, even if
Yeah.
you're still including the same information.
100%. It's always a fine line between like, yeah, because you want to make this efficient, right? You want to make an efficient process. You can't be reinventing the wheel when on average, students have to do 15 application essays, pretty much. Well, it can go up to 50. It just depends on where you apply. Claire, you probably remember the Princeton process and are like, oh, that was rough. They have a lot of essays. So yeah, I mean, and I think to Valentina's point, it is very much meeting the student where they are. So if a student's like, I have a topic idea and I think it's good, and you run it by us and we don't see other potential topics, right, that are a great opportunity based on the brain dump we did, right? Based on this kind of Bible, this like source of truth that we have about the student, then if they want to go and write and feel like they can, go off and do it, and we'll meet you there. If you have a student who needs an outline and needs this to be super scaffolded, we do that too, right? So it just kind of depends on where the student is. And like you had mentioned or alluded to, Valentina, like I've sat down with students and said, tell me the story, and just have a dictating app, take it down, right? And that's the beginning of an essay. But like starting with more information is so incredibly important. Um, I want to show you an example of just some the common topics that we have, or an academic interest or why major. I just want to share this because like this is getting at, this templatized idea of essays with also differentiations, because sometimes if your school, I think Valentina, we were talking about this, but like if your dream school is Wisconsin-Madison and you know a ton about it and you have a personal connection and you want to write about all these things, that might just be a different essay, right? Than a Brown Y activity. And you're like, I don't think I'm going to get in, and I just want to I will put my application in, and I know it's low odds, and I don't even know if I want to go there. Okay, well, why don't we do something for the school you care the most about and really invest some time in that and make that super specific, right? So there's definitely there's a middle ground here, but at the beginning, we want to start thinking by kind of ideas, groups of ideas. So why your major? You will have to write that. Okay, what's the story you want to tell about why major? And it shouldn't just be like, I like it because one, reason two, reason three. It needs to be a story, right? Um, So we've come to the end of our programming for the evening. Thank you all for coming. And it was a Monday night, and we all have things to do. So appreciate you starting your week with us. Just want to talk through a special offer before you all go, and then I will share. We'll share via email the file, which is basically that summer checklist. But also you have a special opportunity for a free Testive Chansby consultation. You're going to get some insights into your current college list. What this is basically an hour where you would sit with me, your advisor, and I would assess your list based on your holistic profile. There's an entire intake form that gets at all the different application components we've talked about today. And based on that, I'll recommend not only like admissions likelihood fits, like here are your targets and here are your likelies. I would also suggest some financial fits. It is a very good idea, given the climate, to have a couple of financial fits for college lined up for your application this year, right? So you want to be really conservative with your list. You want to have a larger list, right, with everything that we know that is going on. So I am happy to offer to be a part of that process for everybody who came to this webinar tonight and spent their time with us. Additionally, we get a detailed review of the student's holistic profile that comes with recommendations on what to do with the summer, right? So full circle. But that is it for our evening. Thank you all so much. Here's a little brief write-up of what the process for the consultation would be like if you wanted to take advantage of the Chansing consult. So you get my Calendly link. I will put that up now. Once I stop sharing my screen. But you'll also get this in your emails as well. So thank you all, Valentina and Claire. Thank you so much for being on this call. But yeah, it was great hearing your perspectives on everything. And Valentina and Claire are also available for work. So if you're interested in working with either of them, give us a shout. Thank you guys and have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, guys. All right.